Hey friends, welcome to HipHughes History, where we're going to do an oldie but a goodie, and that's Fry's Rebellion. That's right, that's the third rebellion that you have to know about. We've done Shays, we've done whiskey. It's time to put the fries in the oven. So what are we waiting for? Why don't we go giddy up for the learning and go get her done right now. Who's ready for a rebellion? I'm ready for a rebellion. And we have to kind of put this in context. If you remember, we have Shay's rebellion. We have a video on that. But that's the failed rebellion under the Articles of Confederation that pushed the federal government to expand its powers under a new constitution. And then that power was kind of shown to be a real thing in the Whiskey Rebellion. That's 1796. And now it's a couple years later. The Federalist Party is in control, and they're going to do something that's going to spark this Fry's Rebellion, named after John Fries. He was an American Revolutionary soldier. He loved his country. He was an auctioneer, and auctioneers are generally pretty cool people, but he is going to lead this rebellion. So let's put this into context. In 1798, the capital is in Philadelphia, which is only 50 miles away from the area that we're talking about in southeastern Pennsylvania. And there is some things going on in the world. The quasi-war is brewing with France, and in response to that, Congress decides they're going to pass a federal tax. It was the only time this has ever been done, specifically on slaves, on land, and on house dwellings. And the amount is cha-ching, $2 million. And Pennsylvania owes about $260,000 of this money. And the German-American residents are not really happy about this prospect of having assessors coming to their house to count their windows. The federal government counted windows because that was used to determine how much you were going to pay. And they're also kind of peeved because the Federalist Party has rallied at the same time to pass the Alien Sedition Act, which they believe is kind of targeted towards people of the Democratic Republican persuasion, and specifically immigrants. And these German Americans are taking offense to it. So they decide this is no good. So you understand why the federal government is raising the money, but you have to also understand why these residents of southeastern Pennsylvania are kind of peeved about it, and how they're looking at the federal government with one eye, kind of like, I don't know if I want to trust you. Only you have to do that with a German accent to make that work out real well. You also have to remember that Pennsylvania, not a lot of slaves. So while landowners and house-dwelling owners in the South aren't really going to feel the pain of this law, people that are kind of poor, working class, that own a small house, they're the ones that are going to feel the pinch. And they're going to try to pinch back, so let me pinch you. So in February of 1799, John Fries, our auctioneer, our patriot, decides that he's going to start organizing meetings of the residents of southeastern counties in Pennsylvania in order to form a resistance to this tax collection, which they believe is unconstitutional and they believe is tyranny. They started putting up liberty poles. How about that? And as the assessors start to come to count their windows, they start to get harassed by the allies of John Fry. And in a couple counties, the assessors were threatened so much that they actually resigned. But there's no real physical violence, and that's kind of a differentiation from past rebellions that we've talked about. Nobody really gets hurt, but it's enough to make the federal government very angry. John Adams is very angry. So he issues federal warrants to compel these people that are resisting to show up in court. And that's where we're going to get into kind of the rebellion. And they end up sending their marshal. He ends up rounding up some individuals in March of 1799, and he brings them to the Sun Inn in Bethlehem. How cool of a name is that in 1799? But John Fry and some other of the local militia and people that are not too happy about what's going on, about 400 of them, are going to march to Bethlehem, where they kind of surround the Sun Inn. And John Fry actually on that day negotiated the release of those prisoners, but immediately the federal government is going to send in the militia. And actually they set a date. They said you needed to break up or we're going to bang your heads up. And they actually did disperse, but the federal government maybe overreacted, but they did send in the militia, and they end up arresting John Fry and about 30 of those resistors. And now we're going to court. the People's Court. Now, actually, it's in Philadelphia, and it's going to be a big treason trial. So they charged 30 men, but they charged John Fry and 2 of them with treason, which is actually defined in the Constitution, and it's very specific that you need 2 witnesses and you need to be basically waging war against the United States government. So the prosecutors in this case are going to actually use the same logic they use under the Whiskey Rebellion to say that any time that Americans band together to violently or march, in uniform against or resisting a law, that can be defined as declaring or levying war against the United States, and they're going to get their convictions. They were sentenced to hang. Actually, the first trial, it was a mistrial. It ended up being a second trial for John Fry, and actually the judge was the Supreme Court Justice Samuel Chase. And Samuel Chase started that trial off by agreeing to this expanded definition of treason, which allowed Mr. Fries to be found guilty again and sentenced to death. Now, interesting side note, Samuel Chase is going to be impeached in 1804 by the House of Representatives, and part of that impeachment lied in his actions in this Fry's trial. But nevertheless, they're sentenced to hang, and the only reason I have a smile on my face is because John Adams isn't going to go that far. He's not going to use that much power. He actually is going to grant an amnesty and a pardon to John Fries and his collaborators, and they're not going to hang. They're not going to be put in jail. And this actually is going to have a couple effects, and those effects are, number one, going to be a fracturing of the Federalist Party. Hamilton was very upset, very mad at John Adams about not letting these 2 guys hang, and it was said that in the upcoming election, some of his support for Adams is going to start to waver, and when that election ended up in a gridlock, he's going to side with Jefferson, and part of that probably lies in this fracturing of enforcing the law under Hamilton's eyes. But we're also going to get the effect of the Federalist Party really being viewed by a lot of people, and especially German Americans in Pennsylvania, as being the enemy, and they're going to lose any type of loyalty to the Federalist Party in that area. It really is another sign in the decline of the Federalist Party. But the third kind of big effect is the federal government is for real, son. That's right. If you didn't believe it in the Whiskey Rebellion, we now know that law and order and the legitimacy of the Constitution is real, and that there's not going to be any more riots or rebellions or overthrowing of the federal government, at least ones that aren't going to be that easy to pull off. I mean, the Civil War, and all. So we hope your brain's a little bit bigger, and we hope you understand the very basic of the Fries Rebellion. You can take them out of the fryer, get a little salt and ketchup, and enjoy your meal. And we hope that you enjoy many more meals of learning at HipHughes History. You can check us out online. We have a video arsenal at hiphughes.com. We have over 450 videos that are broken up by topic, whether you're flipping your class as an educator, or you're a kid that's just freaking out because you have an exam, or you're just cray-cray on the internet. We don't care why you watch. So there you go. And I'm going to say it because I say it at the end of every lecture I've ever done: where attention goes, energy flows, and we'll see you folks next time you press my buttons.